And by the way, this may be the last time you ever see me.
Religious. Are you religious? Do you believe in something? Anything?
Yeah, believe in me.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you don't believe in anything else? In God, or as in, like, is there something like that?
Well, you can separate God from religion, which is what I
When someone is steady and composed as Morgan Freeman suddenly appears unsettled, it sends a clear signal that something serious is unfolding. This is a man whose voice has represented calm, wisdom, and authority for decades. Seeing him tense, careful with his words, and visibly affected was not performance. It was reality breaking through. For days, the public narrative surrounding Rob Reiner's passing had been wrapped in soft language, carefully chosen phrases.
I sat in that chair, and I know exactly what's going through your mind.
Statements designed to cool emotions and avoid deeper questions. But Morgan Freeman did not follow that pattern. When he spoke, he cut past the surface and forced attention toward what had been quietly ignored for years. He didn't appear to offer comfort or repeat safe condolences. He spoke because, in his view, prolonged silence around Nick Reiner was not accidental. It was intentional. Freeman stated plainly that overlooking warning signs for the sake of peace is not neutrality. It is participation. And that perspective landed heavily. This was not a distant industry connection.
Standing outside Los Angeles Superior Courtroom, where there had been a significant development in the Nick Reiner case. Reiner, 32, appeared in court for the second time for the double murder of his parents, Hollywood director Nick Reiner and his wife, Michelle Singer Reiner. Reiner appeared in court in a brown prison outfit. He was very hunched over, his hair newly shorn, and he would occasionally look out over the courtroom. Occasionally would give a grim smile, but for the most part, very much kept staring ahead.
Morgan Freeman and Rob Reiner formed a genuine bond while working together on The Bucket List. That film explored mortality, reflection, and unresolved moments. According to Freeman, those themes were not limited to the script. During late-night conversations on set, Rob often spoke openly about his family. But whenever Nick was mentioned, Freeman said the atmosphere changed. Freeman has built his career on observation. He studies behavior, pauses, tension, and what people avoid saying. What he shared publicly reframed how many now view the Reiner household. At one point, he paused mid-sentence, stepped back from the microphone, and appeared visibly shaken before saying,
I want to thank everybody and anybody who ever had anything at all to do with the making of this picture. But I especially want...
We all saw the cracks, and we kept handing Rob the glue, even though we knew it wouldn't hold. That line alone sent a ripple through the room. While headlines focused on investigation details and the exterior of the Brentwood property, Freeman directed attention to something deeper. He spoke about patterns, about pressure, about years of enabling that slowly led to this outcome.
Some struggles from the time he was 15 to 19 with substance abuse, and he was in and out of a number of rehab facilities, and,
He was not describing a sudden collapse, but a long descent that too many people chose not to confront. Freeman then described a private dinner from 3 years earlier. No cameras, no press, only close industry figures. Nick arrived unexpectedly, and according to Freeman, the entire room went quiet. The tension was immediate, heavy, unsettling. Nick sat down calmly. Rob Reiner, usually the most commanding presence in any space, visibly withdrew. His posture changed.
Is it hard to reveal that stuff for you?
It's not hard to reveal that stuff. It's only hard to reveal that stuff to then get told, you're a spoiled, white, rich kid. And it's like, okay, maybe all these...
His voice softened. Freeman said that was the moment everything became clear to him. A man respected across Hollywood was deeply afraid within his own family. What Freeman shared next was never meant for public ears. He revealed that Rob had reached out to him just weeks before everything fell apart. It wasn't a casual call. It was late at night. Rob spoke in circles, asking questions that didn't sound hypothetical at all. Questions about boundaries, about when love becomes unsafe, about whether it is ever right to step away from your own child. Those are not questions asked from comfort. They come from desperation. Freeman said he advised Rob to prioritize safety, to protect Michelle, to create distance.
Speak so beautifully. Is this something that you worked on, or just from your family? Were they...
I don't even know what you mean. I went to school to study how to be an actor. And in that school, Los Angeles City College, I had a voice and diction instructor who was very good at his job. And so you had to learn to speak and sound your final consonants.
So you
Things
actually
like that.
learned something.
But even as he said it, he knew Rob struggled with that idea. Compassion was not something Rob could turn off. It defined him as a storyteller and as a person. Freeman suggested that Nick understood this deeply. He knew which emotional buttons to press. He knew when vulnerability would invite comfort and when pressure would trigger attempts to fix things with resources rather than boundaries. This is why Freeman firmly rejected the idea that everything happened suddenly. He pushed back against simplified explanations because, as he put it, they are easier to accept. According to him, this was not confusion. It was calculation. He used that word carefully. Nick knew the house, the routines, the timing. He knew how his parents would respond. Freeman suggested that kindness itself became something that could be exploited, that Rob and Michelle were not careless, but compassionate people caught in an impossible situation. They believed empathy could calm something that was already unstable. When Freeman spoke about the final night, his account differed sharply from the official summaries. While reports used technical language, he focused on a detail that stood out to him immediately. There were no signs that Rob attempted to protect himself. To Freeman, that did not signal acceptance. It signaled trust. Rob was not bracing for harm. He was standing in front of his child, still trying to calm him, still trying to connect, still believing there was time to pull him back. Freeman said quietly that Rob did not face a stranger in those final moments. He faced someone he loved. That image stripped away speculation and noise, leaving behind a deeply painful reality. A father who could not accept the worst outcome until it was unavoidable. That, Freeman said, is why he chose to speak when so many others remained silent. Hollywood often closes ranks during moments like this. Stories get softened, details blurred, discomfort buried under distance. Freeman made it clear that silence no longer protected anyone. It only delayed lessons that should have been faced long ago. Preserving a polished image, he said, was no longer the priority. In his view, honoring Rob Reiner means confronting uncomfortable truths rather than shielding them. Beneath Freeman's calm delivery was unmistakable frustration. He did not speak only about Nick. He criticized the system around him. Friends who continued offering financial support after boundaries were set. Industry connections who reopened doors that should have remained closed. People who offered endless second chances not because they were earned, but because of a last name. At one point, Freeman said plainly, "We fed something dangerous, and then we left Rob and Michelle to deal with the consequences." That statement was not just emotional, it was a direct challenge to a culture that confuses compassion with avoidance. Freeman also addressed the narrative many expect to hear next. Discussions about impaired judgment or emotional instability may arise. He did not dismiss mental health concerns, but he warned against using them to erase accountability. Before any courtroom arguments begin, Freeman wanted one thing clear. This story is not about a lack of resources. Nick Reiner had access to treatment, support, and opportunity that most people never see. Ignoring that reality, Freeman said, would be another form of silence that, according to Morgan Freeman, there was nothing confusing about the situation as he personally experienced it. He emphasized that his impressions were not based on rumors or secondhand stories, but on direct interactions. In his view, Nick appeared aware of his surroundings, emotionally alert, and capable of navigating situations intentionally. Freeman was careful not to present this as a diagnosis or a legal conclusion, but as a personal observation formed over time. Coming from someone with Freeman's reputation and credibility, those remarks carried weight, not because they replaced evidence, but because they challenged the idea that everything unfolded in a fog of confusion. Freeman's voice entered the public conversation before any formal legal proceedings, and that alone began shaping how many people understood the situation. Notably, several figures closely connected to Rob Reiner, including longtime friends and collaborators, chose not to speak publicly. That silence felt heavy, not necessarily as disagreement, but as restraint. Freeman went further than most were willing to, cutting through speculation that had already begun drifting in uncomfortable directions. In the days following the news, whispers had started to surface. Some questioned Rob's role as a parent. Others hinted at hidden dysfunction inside the household. Freeman addressed those implications directly. He described the Reiner home as loving, stable, and grounded for many years. He spoke about Michelle Singer Reiner with visible respect, portraying her as patient, steady, and deeply committed to keeping the family together. In his telling, there was no underlying darkness in that home. What existed was effort, care, and hope. Freeman framed what happened not as a collapse from within, but as a disruption that overwhelmed even a strong foundation. That distinction mattered to him, especially as narratives began forming rapidly in the public space. Freeman then mentioned something that caught immediate attention. He referred to a script Rob had been quietly working on. Details were not shared, but Freeman suggested it was deeply personal. He raised the possibility that Nick may have encountered it before everything unraveled. That idea introduced a difficult layer. If Rob had been writing honestly about family struggle, identity, or personal conflict, and if someone recognized themselves in those pages, not in a flattering light, but as a cautionary figure, that realization could have been deeply unsettling. Freeman did not claim this as fact. He presented it as a possibility worth considering. Sometimes, Freeman suggested, truth on paper can confront people in ways conversations never do. He made it clear that his intention was not to shock or provoke. His goal was to slow the narrative before it hardened into something distorted. In his view, the truth was already painful enough without being reshaped for comfort or convenience. Freeman described Rob as someone who had finally begun placing his own lived reality into his work. He noted that honesty can become dangerous when it challenges long-standing denial. Truth, once written, does not always remain quiet, especially in environments where difficult realities have been avoided. Timing, Freeman said, mattered. He revealed that he spoke with Michelle just 2 days before everything collapsed. She did not sound panicked. She sounded tired. Not fearful, but worn down in a way that comes from years of careful emotional management. According to Freeman, she mentioned that Nick planned to visit for the holidays. One more attempt to reconnect. One more effort to restore balance. Freeman admitted that the conversation left him uneasy. He encouraged her to consider meeting in a neutral space, somewhere public, somewhere less emotionally charged. He described the home as something sacred, a place meant to remain calm and protected. That advice, he said, stayed with him. What followed was not anger, but guilt. Freeman acknowledged questioning himself afterward, wondering if he should have been more forceful, if he should have intervened directly, if he should have shown up instead of offering words from a distance. That internal questioning was visible when he spoke publicly. What people saw was not outrage, but the weight of hindsight. The kind that comes when you realize warnings were voiced, but hope kept them from being acted on. Freeman shifted then to Rob Reiner as a public figure, a creator whose work brought warmth and connection to millions. Films like When Harry Met Sally and The Princess Bride became emotional landmarks for generations. Reconciling that legacy with such a painful ending creates a difficult, emotional contrast. Freeman tried to bridge that gap. He explained that the joy Rob created publicly did not erase the heaviness he carried privately. Fame, he reminded people, does not create immunity. Influence does not block harm. Resources do not automatically resolve instability. He stripped away the illusion that powerful people live separate from ordinary pain. Then Freeman returned to the subject of Nick. This time, he did not soften his words. He spoke about entitlement, not as arrogance, but as something corrosive. He recalled a moment on a set where Nick reacted harshly toward a production assistant over something minor. Rob intervened, not to defend his son, but to apologize on his behalf. That image stayed with Freeman, a respected filmmaker, stepping in to repair damage caused by his adult child. Freeman described Rob as visibly exhausted in that moment, embarrassed, diminished. He emphasized that this was not an isolated incident. Over time, Freeman said, moments of disrespect evolved into financial strain. Financial strain deepened into emotional exhaustion. And emotional exhaustion eventually crossed into something far more serious. The process was gradual, predictable, and in hindsight, deeply troubling. Freeman wanted people to understand that this story did not erupt suddenly. It unfolded slowly, each ignored moment stacking onto the next, each compromise pushing boundaries further back. In his eyes, this is not simply a developing case. It is a cautionary story about what happens when love advances while boundaries retreat. And the most painful truth, he said, is that everyone involved believed there was still time. At the center of everything Freeman shared was grief, not only for the loss of a friend, but for the collapse of hope itself. He described Rob Reiner's greatest vulnerability as the same quality that defined him as a father. He never stopped believing his son would return to who he once was. Rob held on to the idea that the person in front of him was temporary, that anger and volatility were phases. Freeman framed this as a warning to parents everywhere. At what point does hope stop being love and start becoming danger? According to Freeman, that line had been crossed long before anyone wanted to admit it. But parental love, he said, distorts clarity. Parents don't see threats. They see memories. They see potential. Freeman also acknowledged that by speaking publicly, he understood the legal sensitivity of his words. He was not testifying. He was not declaring outcomes. But he was aware that his descriptions challenged any future attempt to portray the situation as entirely misunderstood or accidental. And that, he said, is why he spoke when he did. Because Morgan Freeman was careful not to speculate. He didn't speak in vague impressions or hypotheticals. He spoke from personal experience and emotional conviction. He emphasized that love and support never stopped, that help was offered repeatedly, and that responsibility was not absent from the situation. In doing so, he fundamentally altered how many people now view what happened. That shift matters. When someone with Freeman's lifetime of credibility speaks plainly, people listen differently. He didn't call for silence or privacy. He didn't ask the public to move on. Instead, he asked people to look closer, to stop skimming headlines, and start paying attention to long-term patterns that often get ignored until it's too late. Freeman made it clear that he wants Nick Reiner understood not as a rumor, not as a simplified villain, and not as a caricature created by the internet, but as a person shaped by repeated choices within a system that too often bends around influence. He openly acknowledged an uncomfortable truth. In powerful families, consequences are sometimes delayed, softened, or redirected in ways most people would never experience. He wasn't speaking from anger. He was speaking from resolve. Freeman lost more than a colleague. He lost a friend. Someone he shared long conversations with. Someone he laughed with about aging, about slowing down, about life after the spotlight. Those memories are now permanently changed, and beneath his words there was a clear sense of betrayal. Not only personal betrayal, but what he implied was institutional betrayal. He suggested that people within the industry had seen warning signs and chose silence. Incidents at private gatherings, moments of inappropriate behavior brushed aside to avoid discomfort. Freeman implied that protecting reputation slowly became more important than confronting risk, and in that avoidance, the outcome many feared may have been made more likely. Good intentions, he reminded everyone, don't erase real-world consequences. Freeman never directly asked this question, but it lingered heavily. Does Nick understand how much the story has shifted? Does he realize that a voice trusted by generations has reframed the narrative in a way that won't easily fade? When Freeman spoke about Michelle, his tone softened completely. He described her as the anchor of the family, the balance, the steady presence that kept everything functioning for as long as it did. He made sure she would not be reduced to a footnote or an afterthought. In his words, she was the heart of that household. And it was precisely that fact, Freeman said, that made the situation impossible to rationalize. Anger or emotional instability might explain one harmful act, but not the loss of both parents. In his view, crossing that line eliminated any remaining space for excuses. He described it not as chaos, but as something colder and more a deliberate choice. At that point, his tone changed. This was no longer grief searching for answers. It was clarity. When asked how Rob Reiner should be remembered, Freeman didn't talk about awards or films. He paused and said Rob should be remembered as a man who loved without limits. Then he added, quietly but firmly, that Nick would be remembered as someone who never learned how to return that love. That contrast landed heavily. It stripped away fame, status, and spectacle, leaving behind a deeply human story about broken connection inside a family. This is no longer just a celebrity story. It's about what happens when love continues without boundaries, and when warning signs are dismissed for too long. As this moves forward, disbelief is giving way to anger and reflection. Freeman didn't create that reaction. He focused it. And that focus is now aimed at both individual responsibility and the systems that allowed troubling behavior to go unchallenged. What comes next will not stay quiet. As one voice breaks silence, others often follow. Old stories resurface. Past incidents are re-examined. Long-standing assumptions are questioned. The image many people held onto will not survive unchanged. Rob Reiner was a storyteller who understood structure and consequences. Freeman suggested that Rob may have sensed where things were heading, yet still hoped the ending could be changed. That may be the most painful truth of all. Freeman can't rewrite what happened. All he can do now is describe what remains. And what remains is heavy, uncomfortable, and necessary to confront. Silence didn't protect anyone here. Avoidance didn't heal anything. Only truth remains. If something like this can happen behind gates, wealth, and influence, It forces a hard reality into view. No amount of status can fully protect a family when something inside is already breaking. When Morgan Freeman stepped away from the cameras, he did so alone. Not as an icon, but as a man carrying loss. And that loss has visibly changed him. The legal process will continue, dates will be set, and arguments will be made. But in the public mind, a line has already been drawn. Freeman's words didn't sound like commentary. They sounded like a warning delivered too late. This story isn't about fame anymore. It's about ignored warning signs, misplaced hope, and love stretched beyond its limits. And stories like this matter not because they're dramatic, but because they force conversations people usually avoid. If this story impacted you, make sure to like the video, share it, and subscribe so you don't miss future updates. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective matters. And check out the next video on your screen for more stories that go deeper than the headlines.